Psychoanalysis, surreal. We come back to the topic of the surreal. We defined it in a session before. Another session, we took a look at how it is everywhere. To revise our fundamentals, I defined there the real and the surreal. And the definition of real was all that is logical, necessary, banal, without any enrichment of the surreal. That is the real, which is very different from the real of Lacan or the real of philosophy or the real used in the sense of real versus imaginary. So I use the word real and the word surreal in a particular way, which I have defined in a session before. And then after definition, there is another session where I have delineated how surreal is found everywhere. And the idea is our hardware is such, our unconscious minds are so structured that there is a dramatist in our unconscious mind. There is surreal in our unconscious mind. There is melodrama in our unconscious mind. It is there by default, by virtue of our hardware. I therefore say God loves drama. God loves melodrama. We really find that our desires are mostly in the surreal and we tolerate the real more or less like a necessary evil. Few people enjoy the real, and even when they do it because the real is soaked unknowingly into a surreal. The surreal has enriched the real. They have been able to synthesize some component of surreal into the real. Today what we will do is, we will revise the concept of the real and surreal, and on the line of Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations, try to find out in everyday discourse how you find surreal everywhere, in every statement we speak, in every act that we do. I should not say every act, I should not say every statement, but in most of the statements we speak, most of the acts that we do, most of the circumstances we create or we find ourselves in, how the surreal is pervasive across human existence. So we will go into it today, and as we proceed deeper, we will have more sessions later on the surreal. But with today's session, I will take a halt because the first part of my recordings, which are deep into psychoanalysis or psychoanalysis and philosophy, I will complete today with this and then move on to other areas. And again, after moving on to other areas, once I have completed those areas, possibly come back to surreal. To rewind, we define the real and the surreal, and the real can be experienced as the good, the banal, or the tragic. Most of the real is the banal real. There is also the tragic real, like loss in the court of law or loss of in business or having to put up with circumstances one doesn't like, the tragic real. And there is also the good part of the real that one enjoys. Similarly, there is a good part of the imaginative surreal, a banal part of the imaginative surreal, the petty surreal of everyday run-of-the-mill masses. And there is a tragic surreal, pathological surreal with which we deal largely in psychoanalysis. Most of us see real only as a necessary evil. Most of the real that we find is either banal or tragic. Very small percentage of it is the good real. And the desire is largely in the surreal. The surreal desire we can classify into a need, want, and desire. So there is in the unconscious mind a need gets translated into a specific want. And in this process, we find the surreal coming in. Want has an element of surreal. And every desire is covered in the surreal because we satisfy very few desires in the form of need. We mostly convert need into want and then satisfy the desire in the form of a want. So in practice, every desire is practically covered in the surreal. The real also gets translated into a surreal whenever we find a choice to do so. In our unconscious mind, therefore, nature has kept the surreal, the histrionic, the dramatic. All these three elements are in our unconscious mind, and therefore reality acceptance is so difficult. One of the reasons why reality acceptance is so difficult, apart from the insistence of desire, the infinity of desire, is also the fact that in our unconscious mind, the surreal, the histrionic, and the dramatic are very strong elements. So this we have already covered before. This was just a revision. And now we move forward. There I go again into the surreal. This is so much of me who gets lost in imagination every half an hour. I might find myself at home in the surreal. So let us proceed today. Let us look at our everyday, 24 hours of our day, and see where we encounter the surreal in 24 hours of our existence. First point, the moment I decide that I want to identify surreal, which is surrounding me, what do I find? I find an overwhelming feeling of being overwhelmed by so much of surreal around me. Just where I'm sitting in this room, there is so much of surreal around me that it is overwhelming the moment I try to find out how I am surrounded by or soaked in the surreal. Every product around me, every wall around me, every situation around me, wherever I see, wherever I feel, there is overwhelming presence of the pervasive surreal. A gasp of breath as I drown in the downpour of liquid walls of vivid colors. That is the experience that you get the moment you try to see the surreal everywhere. It just comes gushing down on you. and you take a gasp of breath as it comes down gushing on you. A gasp of breath as I drown in the downpour of liquid walls of vivid colors. This is the first feeling that one gets as one starts to identify the surreal all around oneself. I look around walls and I see how much of thought has gone, how many ideas have gone, how many surreal considerations were considered before choosing the color or the wallpaper or the embellishment of the walls. Just see around you, and the walls have been decorated with so much of surreal thinking. I go to sleep into my dreams, and the dreams are full of surreal. So I sleep into the surreal, I wake up into the surreal. After I wake up, of course, there is a gap before the surreal activates and starts overwhelming me. My dreams and fantasies are full of surreal. Even the daydreams are full of surreal. Every product around me is soaked in the surreal. Every product is aesthetically created, so named, so branded that it's a package of surreal surrounding, an invisible package of surreal surrounding the product. Every product is soaked in the surreal. Corporate communication is surreal communication. It's not a real communication. Government communication, more often than not, is becoming surreal communication as it tries to be as smart as corporate communication. Look at the book covers. I go to a bookshop and I look at book covers. I look at pictures of gods, the way holy books are covered up, the stories that I hear around me, the stories I see on television, mythology that I read, everything is soaked into the surreal. I go further out, I see the flats, which is soaked in stories of the surreal. I see buildings architecturally so designed that the architectural design and the decor is soaked in the surreal. Every festival is soaked in the surreal in mythological terms or in manifest celebration terms. There is an entire experience economy out there where the experience they are selling is primarily a surreal experience. Art is surreal. All the components of art essentially are loaded with the surreal. There is a very strong element of sports. Sports also is surreal. So as I look at my 24 hours, the entire thing from waking to moving around in the world to going to sleep and sliding into dreams, the whole experience is largely soaked into the surreal. It's almost 80% of the experiences are soaked in the surreal. Go further into the everyday. I wake up and move into the surreal. The clothes I choose, the way I put attention on my looks, the cosmetics I consume, and the stories around the cosmetics that the corporates have woven, all of it is surreal. In my own room, I saw right in front of me an old childhood table fan, 40 years old, more than 40 years old. Hardly works, but I still keep it because there's so much of surreal content associated with the memory. The real would be the myth of the Sisyphus, the drudgery of the real. What Sisyphus actually felt was the drudgery of the real. But the way this is described as an element of surreal. So while describing even the most tragic of real, we get into the surreal. I go to a tea spot, a cafe, or a theater I see communication all around, right from the name of the tea spot, cafe or theater, to the decor, to everything that is there, including the menu. Everything is soaked in the surreal. Happiness, what we say, one way to define it is the absence of the tragic real. But you feel it only when, apart from the tragic real, the banal real also is absent. Then you really feel it in the positive sense. When the banal real is present, it is absence of pain, but still not a presence of pleasure. Real is largely a suffering, and everyone dreads the tragic real. I dread the tragic real. Even when I go on walks in solitude, in my mind, the surreal is active. I see all around. Even if I am walking alone, I can see everything around soaked in the surreal. The great problems of life in human existence also are problems in the surreal. There can be problems in the real if there are droughts, if there are natural tragedies, if there are medical tragedies, there can, like COVID, we can have great problems in the real, but they are rare. Most of the great problems are in the surreal. These problems are problems of ideology. Communism versus capitalism, it's a conflict in the surreal. Philosophy and spirituality is in the surreal. I have a dream, a political speech soaked in the surreal. We will find them in the mountains, a political speech soaked in the surreal. Empire building is largely in the surreal. The jihadi comic mischief is again in the surreal. Psychoanalysis operates largely in the surreal, except when we come to reality acceptance. Every day, every hour, everyone lives and speaks the surreal. At least for some time. May not be every moment, but largely. Goals of life are also largely in the surreal. Enlightenment is a surreal goal. It's not a real goal. The path to enlightenment is completely surreal. The whole of mysticism and spirituality is soaked in the surreal. Strangely, enlightenment, the enlightenment as a goal is surreal. The path to enlightenment is surreal, but enlightenment itself is freedom from the surreal, which is not the same as annihilation of the surreal. It is mastery of the surreal, so we can enter and operate on will. It's very difficult even for an enlightened person to annihilate the surreal. On the lines of philosophical investigations, let us look at some of the real life examples of how people speak or people write or people put up something soaked in the surreal. I have taken example from a variety of areas of everyday life to discover and uncover rather the surreal, which is already there. I was reading a newspaper and it says, specter of drought looms large. How surreal is this language? Somebody has really put in imagination to cut out these good words. It could be said in a very real, banal way also. In movies, we find this one statement, my name is Bond, James Bond. The entire statement is soaked in surreal. In ordinary conversations, we hear a statement, look great today. Again loaded, soaked in the surreal. In a hospital, I saw this. This I also see in some of the doctor's prescription letters. It says, the doctor's letterhead. It says, we treat or I treat, he cures. Such a surreal statement even in the medical context. In municipal parks, I see this statement, green is great. Again, a surreal statement. Very metaphorical, very imaginative. On crossroads, I see this statement, stop when red. Everything is so symbolic, so surreal. In theaters, I see this statement, sink into luxury near their seats. In Disneyland, I see posters of Mickey and McDonald, stories about them. In political rallies, we hear, I have a dream. In hotels, the chef comes and says, makes a small talk and says, enjoy, and he has those surreal statements cut out for the occasion. In cafe, in the menu, I see, and a dash of mint. Again, a surreal statement. In schools and colleges, I hear the statement, students talking to each other. It's a cool college. Again, a surreal statement. In the area of sports, I see this statement, be young. In newsreaders, use this statement to add fuel to the fire. Ex-politician did why. Completely soaked in the surreal. YouTube channels, one of them is titled Swarajya, very metaphorical, and they go on to explain what is Swarajya. Again, a navigation into the surreal. In library, I see a statement, quiet is rewarding. In operation theaters, I see this statement, small pain, large gain. In psychoanalytic clinic, I heard this statement once, come to terms in psychoanalysis. In students' hostel groups, often I see this statement written somewhere on the walls, I was here. In social functions, they hold a social contest, a very imaginative social contest to involve everybody. In one of the religious spaces, I heard this statement, peace in pink stone, because a temple was made in pink stone. On Independence and Republic Days, in many countries, we hear this statement, we shall prevail, we shall overcome. In office conversations, we see people talking about the boss, he just sucks. In vegetable markets, we see this deal of the decade. All of these statements in everyday discourse are soaked in the surreal. So we see here how, on the lines of philosophical investigation, even when people don't want to do something imaginative consciously, they don't want to go into surreal consciously, they won't even know the word surreal, yet in our hardware, in our unconscious mind, the surreal, the dramatic, the melodramatic, the imaginative is already hardwired into us. And because of it, the surreal is found everywhere if we pay attention to everyday conversation, everyday actions, everyday situations, everyday circumstances. The surreal is pervasive in human existence. On the lines of philosophical investigations, what we have done today is a surreal investigation and discovered or uncovered surreal everywhere. This will take us one step ahead in our discussion of the surreal from where we stopped last time, and we'll keep going deeper into it as we go ahead. Thank you. If you have any questions, write down to hvindia@gmail.com. I will be for some time moving to some other topics and then come back to the surreal as I develop this area and go deeper into the surreal. Thank you.